So we have been right smack in the middle of terrestrial season here in central Indiana. And although we don't have a lot of trout, we do have a lot of warm water species that love grasshoppers, crickets, any of these terrestrial bugs that are frequent this time of year. So I'm tying a hopper pattern today. This is the Letort Hopper. It is one of my favorite hopper patterns because it's so easy to tie and it is so versatile. It works so well. It's 3 ingredients. There's the body, there's a wing case, and then there's some deer hair for a wing and the head. If you are not comfortable with deer hair, it's an excellent fly to work on because even if this is kind of shaggy and ragged, as long as it floats, it works really, really well. So if you're into throwing terrestrials for warm water species or for trout, at this time of year, Letort Hopper is a great fly. I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the Letort Hopper with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad 9671 in a size 8. I like a little bit longer shank on this. A lot of these are tied with a shorter shank, a 2x long shank, and you could tie this with, say, a 3906B, which is a little heavier wire, 2x long if you want. But this is a little bit lighter wire and a little bit longer, just my preference. Debarb the hook. I'm going to attach my thread. The thread I'm using a UTC Ultra Thread 140 Denier in a brown. I'm going to attach my thread about a third of the way down the hook shank. This space right here is going to be for our deer hair head, and I'm going to wrap the thread on down to the end of the shank, which is just about over the barb. The body is a yellow dubbing. Most of them that I've seen are like what's it called? It's a dry fly dubbing, super fine or something like that, dry fly dubbing. I like to use wool. This is a yellow wool, but I've also seen this tied in other colors. So you could use like a green or a light green or something like that if you want. And there's other dubbings. You could use an Antron dubbing if you want to for this. I'm going to tie this in so that the end of that is just about at the end of the body. You don't want to bulk up the front of that too much as I tie in the wing case and then the wing and the head on this. I'm going to twist this yarn counterclockwise to flatten it out in the back. I prefer just to go ahead and have a uniform flat body, but you could, if you wanted to, try to build up. Like right here, I'll pile up a little bit more each wrap, overlapping them basically to get myself a little bit more of a tapered body, if that's what you prefer. But if it's nice and level, I think you're just fine. I'm going to bind this down, smoothing this area off. This is where we'll be spinning a little bit of deer hair for our head. I'll bring my thread back and I'm going to climb up that back body just a little bit here. So here we're putting on what would be considered a wing case on this. I'm going to use some Ozark turkey for this. But what I want to do first is I want to put some cement, preferably a flexible cement like I actually used some Dave's Flex Cement on this. I actually coated a large section of this whole tail as I was tying up a bunch of these. I'm going to trim this a little bit wider than the gap of the hook, and then I'll peel that off. But what the Flex Cement does is it makes it a little more rigid, keeps these barbs from separating when you're tying it in as well as fishing it. Now I want to square off this end. I want to trim this or separate this so that it is about the gap of the hook, maybe even just a little bit less. Too wide, it tends to wrap around too much. And now to prep this, I'm going to hold this end even with the bend of the hook. And then up front here, this is where I'm going to tie it in. So I'm going to cut this just a little bit longer so I have a little bit extra to tie in. Then I'm going to fold this in half. And on this end here, I'm going to cut this at an angle. Wrong angle. I want to cut this at an angle so that at the top where that's folded together, I have a little bit of a point. That way, when I unfold it and tie this in, I've got a bit of a point. That's all. You can round that off if you want, but most people just do that and they get a bit of a point. We're going to put this right on top so that that point is just a little bit past the bend of the hook. And then I'm going to wrap that in. Smoothing this off just a little bit. I want to keep my thread right here up against that wing case. At this point, I'm putting a little bit of head cement in here. This is just to help hold this together a little bit. That's all. Now we're going to put in our wing. The wing is just some deer hair. You can use a lighter or darker deer hair if you want, depending on the size. You're going to want to make certain you have some longer fibers. It's just easier to deal with. So I'm going to cut a clump out that's about half a pencil in diameter. I've already stacked this. I'm going to get that stacked nice and even. Now that's a little bit too much, more than I want for this size hook. So I will take some of that out. That's the advantage to taking a little bit more than you want, because you can always thin it out a little bit. I want to tie these in so the tips are just a little bit beyond the halfway point on that wing case. Somewhere, I like it somewhere between the halfway point and the tip. They are going to flare up. So if I put these right about here, they're going to flare up really, really nice. Now, I'm going to hold this, transferring this to my left hand. I'm going to hold this knowing that right off my fingers is my tie-in spot. I want to trim all this off. I don't need it. So I'm going to trim just somewhere around the eye of the hook. What that will do is shorten that up a little bit because I don't need it. And that is going to flare out and then help in providing some bulk for our head of our hopper. I'm going to get a couple wraps around here and then pull this down. I do want to push this down just a little bit so that it kind of covers the sides a little. Then pulling these back, I'm going to advance forward my thread through some of that hair and then get it right up in front of all of that deer hair. A couple of wraps to secure that right down up front there. So this is our wing, which we'll shape in a little bit, and then this is going to be the head. So I'm going to cut another clump of deer hair out. This one's going to be maybe a half to 3/4 of a pencil in diameter. You really want to tie in just a little bit more on this, because this is going to make up the bulk of the head of the Letort Hopper. So I've got a little bit bigger clump here. I'm going to clean this. Get all the short underfur out. And this time I'm trimming off these tips because I don't need those. So holding all those butt ends in my hand, I'm then going to trim off the tips here because I don't need them. Transfer it back over to my material hand here, sweeping all of that back. I'm then going to get a couple wraps around here and then spin that hair in. Now I'm using a 140 denier so that I can pull on that hair just a little bit more, but put a few extra wraps in. You don't have to really crank on it. We just need it to be held in real well. Now I've covered the eye up just a little bit, too much hair, but that's fine. I'm going to take my half-hitch tool over the eye here and just push that back a little bit so that I can then get my thread right up behind the eye of the hook for a couple of turns. I use my half-hitch tool again to get in 3 or 4 half hitches right behind the eye of the hook. Trim away my thread. Now the Letort Hopper has a head on it here, and it is pretty much just square. So the one thing we want to be careful as we are trimming all of this is we don't want to trim our wing off back here. I'm going to take a new razor blade. This is a nice new sharp single-edged razor blade. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to trim this fairly close to the bottom of the fly. Don't get into the body material there, but you just want to have that kind of flat, like that. Now the sides and then the top are going to be further away from the body. And I don't want to push this through all the way through to where my wing is. I want to just come up close to it, and then I'll use my scissors to finish that off. So as you can see, the sides here, I cut further away from the center, as well as the top, I'll do the same. And you can start even further away if you want, and then trim it down to where you want to be. That's up to you. Always better off trimming a little off at a time. Here I'm just lining this up with the eye of the hook, coming straight down. So I pretty much have my square shape for my head. Now I need to finish off by trimming the butt ends around the wing without getting the wing, and then finish shaping. I just like to kind of pull the wing back, take my scissors in here, keeping with the overall shape of the head. I'm just going to slowly get to all those little butt sections. Take your time with it. And if it's not perfect, I wouldn't get too concerned about it. Fish love this fly, and they are going to beat it up as it is. Keep trimming those back, holding that wing out of the way. Now, sometimes you'll get, often the wing will kind of, when you're pulling that and flaring it, it wants to start going around the sides of the hook shank. So I just reach up here at some of these lower ones and just trim those back so that the wing is more on the upper portion of the fly. Again, I don't think if you left those in there that it would detract from the effectiveness of the fly. Now I have, my head's just shape is a little off here. I've got this side's a little bit longer. So I'm going to trim those back just a little. This is where you can use that nice sharp blade to just finesse the hair a little bit. If you find yourself when you're working with deer hair like this and your blade, you're feeling like you have to saw it back and forth, your blade's dull, get a new blade. It is not worth trying to saw it back and forth. You're much better off just get a new blade. They're cheap. They do a nice, easy job. Dull blades don't do a very good job. And that is pretty much it. The other thing you'll find if you work with deer hair is that half the battle of working with deer hair on flies like this is knowing when to quit. You can always, always, always trim more. So I could sit here for the next 15, 20 minutes trimming a little bit more here, a little bit more there, just trying to get this just perfect. But I'm going to take another snip here and just leave it. There you go. So that head ended up being a little bit longer than normal. Usually I like them to stop right about here, but hey, that happens. The great thing about the Letort Hopper is that it is quick to make, especially if you're comfortable with deer hair. If you're not comfortable with deer hair, it's a great fly to start tying with deer hair, flaring and spinning, and working on becoming more comfortable with it, because it is a very, very versatile material, especially when it comes to terrestrial patterns and topwater patterns and the like. One little butt section right there. Okay. Oh, wait. Did I get it? Nope. Now I'm done. There you go. It's complete. So that is the Letort Hopper. Excellent grasshopper terrestrial pattern for this time of year. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at Devise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.